I remember it like it was yesterday. It was 1977, Star Wars had just come out, and I remember getting to the theater and getting settled in, and the lights went down, and then all of a sudden this amazing sound that I'd never heard before came over the speakers. And it just had this amazing intensity on the top of it. I didn't know what it was. I was just a boy, but I just knew it was amazing. That sound stuck with me, and then in 4th grade they had instrument demonstrations coming around the classrooms. And I heard the trumpet again, and I was sure that this was exactly what I wanted to do. I remember running home and telling my parents about it. They helped me rent a trumpet, and I don't think the trumpet ever left my sight for the next 35 years. Yeah, I really knew that that was what I wanted to do for the rest of my life at that moment. My mother has a really strong musical background. She used to, before she started a family, she used to have her own big band. She danced. She was actually in the Radio City Music Hall Rockettes in New York City for a length of time. But she's really musically inclined, and she was really supportive of my education and everything like that. And she exposed me to amazing stuff. I mean, I was really lucky to be alive at a time where you could go hear Miles Davis and Maynard Ferguson and Chuck Mangione. Chuck Mangione was the first concert my mom took me to hear after I started to play the trumpet. And you know, Doc Severinsen, all these amazing players that I got to hear live. I got to hear one of Miles Davis's last concerts, which was incredible. I studied with Vincent Macrina, who's director of bands at Brockton High School, and he's just a fabulous trumpet player and a fabulous guy, and told me all the right things to do when I was young, so I was lucky to not have too many bad habits as I matured as a player. But he really set me off on a really solid foundation. And he was strict, I remember. I knew about in 7th or 8th grade that I wanted to go to college to study the trumpet. I was really into jazz when I was in grade school, and I love jazz, I still do. But when I got to college, and I actually had an assistantship in college to play in the jazz band, I got really drawn to classical trumpet, and particularly chamber music. The Empire Brass was in residence at Boston University, and hearing them play and seeing, you know, the artistic freedom that they had, and you know, if they wanted to play any piece of music, they could arrange it for the group and play it, and there was no kind of corporate architecture, if you will, to chamber music. It's just a small group of people getting together and kind of managing themselves. So that was really attractive to me. So I really focused on that in college. I studied with Roger Voisin, who's one of the most amazing figures in the orchestral trumpet world. And I remember having a conversation with him. I said, look, I really don't want to learn orchestra stuff because I'm really focused on this. I want to do solos, and I want to just become a better trumpet player so I can apply it to chamber music. And he was fine with that. So we worked hard together for a number of years, and then I got out of school, and me and a few of my buddies at school, we started a brass quintet called the Bay State Brass. Started rehearsing a lot, started arranging a lot, tried to get management for a long time unsuccessfully, but that's how my chamber music career kind of started that way in school. I started to take orchestra auditions kind of under protest. My chamber music career had pretty much, the wheels had fallen off of it. I had a group called Paramount Brass, and we were on tour for about 10 years and doing a lot of good dates, but still not making a living. And then our management, we had management for about 4 years, and our management ran out of resources. So the group kind of fell apart, and at that point I was pretty content to continue on with my part-time job. I had a great friend in my brass quintet, Lewis Anderson, who builds trombones for S.E. Shires. He wouldn't hear of me quitting, and he insisted that I take some orchestra auditions. And he was relentless. He actually gave me his entire excerpt book collection, a duffel bag full of mutes, a union paper, recordings of the best orchestras playing the greatest repertoire, and he gave me probably the most important part of the box was the Phil Smith excerpt CD, which every serious orchestra, aspiring orchestra trumpet player should have this disc. It basically gives you all the answers to the test. If you can go into an audition and play anything close to what he can do, what he's doing on the CD, then you're going to do well. I called Roger Wazan and said, look, I know I've been out of school for a while, but I've had a change of heart. Can I come over and can you teach me all the excerpts? And he invited me over. His wife made dinner, and we had like a 4-hour lesson in his basement. He taught me so much in that lesson. He was an amazing, amazing person and an amazing teacher. He was just an amazing guy. After I got done preparing for the auditions, after I, really got into the excerpts and stuff, I have to admit I was a little bit amused at the time that I could go into a room and play for 10 minutes and get a job. Because of the background I was coming from. My brass quintet, we were playing, 10,000 notes in an hour on tour, and now all I had to do was go in and play the ballerina solo or the Petrushka solo. I mean, at the time, when you've been reading violin parts and oboe parts and flute parts for 10 years, you come into this situation, it's just not... I didn't realize that it was difficult, so I just did it. Success is what happens when preparation meets opportunity. As long as I've been really working on my playing and keeping up with my, my craft, and all these opportunities are presenting themselves and I'm prepared for them, I still can't believe I've seen what I've seen and met the people I've met just because I play the trumpet. It's incredible. There's like 3 big things that I had to get used to doing. The first thing was that I had to find my sound, which was and control my sound in ways that was much different than chamber music. In chamber music you can play like a soloist all the time, but in the orchestra you're kind of wearing 2 different hats. You have to play in a really solid kind of way in certain styles and certain repertoire. When you have a solo you have to switch hats and be that chamber soloist all of a sudden. The second thing that's a lot different about orchestra playing and chamber music is the repertoire is so powerful. I mean, you're on stage with 100 people and you're playing like the best music ever written. And it's when you're on stage doing it, never mind in a principal wind chair, it's incredibly exciting. I mean, it's like being in a fighter jet, really. And the music can sweep you away, and it can affect your body, it can affect your breathing and all this stuff. And that's not really something you want happening when you're trying to play the music. Getting used to not being swept up in it physically and emotionally too much, so I can't play, is, I still think about this. I still have to, stay grounded. And then the third thing is dynamics. The dynamic range of the orchestra is much bigger than a chamber group, in the louds and especially the softs. I've never thought I would have to learn to play as soft as I have to play in the orchestra, but you really have to play soft. I mean, and it takes a while to figure out how to do it. I don't think that I have to look a certain way to play in an orchestra, to be honest with you. I feel like it's really important for symphonic music as a whole to evolve as time elapses, for dress codes to go away, and for the exclusivity of attending a classical music performance. I think that this is really no longer appropriate. I mean, we're operating on a 100-year-old paradigm still. This music's for everybody, and I really believe if Beethoven and Mozart were alive now, that they would get really upset if they found out that some people were being turned away from hearing their music because they weren't dressed right, or they had tattoos, or whatever, you know. I really think that there's work to be done there.